Thank you all again so much for making the time. I'm very grateful to welcome you to the first Diversio webinar of 2025. I'm Daniel Fellows, the General Manager of Diversio UK and EU, alongside Anya Klimbovskaia, co-founder and CEO of Diversio. For those of you who may be meeting Diversio for the first time, Diversio is a people, culture, inclusion, analytics and training platform. Companies use Diversio to make critical business decisions powered by our ethical AI for the deepest understanding of any team, covering people, culture, and also delivering world-class training and educational programs either in person or online. Launched in Canada in 2019 and now working in 51 countries globally. During our live and on-demand webinar, we'll cover four main areas. Anya and myself will give you a brief introduction to Diversio shortly. We'll look at some top trends for 25, so looking into hybrid work, intersectional strategies, and the evolving role of compliance. And then we'll give you some practical guidance, some sort of takeaways back into the office, navigating key regulations such as the EU AI Act, Worker Protection Act 2023, and some more. And then at the end, the most exciting part will be Anya walking us through the 2025 Diversio product roadmap, how we can help your organization stay ahead and also be compliant. Anya, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks so much, Daniel. Hi, everyone. My name is Anya. I'm the co-founder and chief operating officer of Diversio. My prior history before the company, although that feels like such a long time ago now, since we've been around for almost 7 years, 7 years this April. But before Diversio, I was in academia working on economic and big data studies on the benefits of having diversity to organizational performance. So things like revenue and productivity. And after that, I worked at Canada's largest bank, RBC, leading the bank's thought leadership as the director of the CEO. And there we were working on trends in the future of work and what was going to be most relevant to double down on, 10, 20, 30 years into the future. And of course, DI, people and culture, was a really big part of that conversation as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. So we'll give you a whirlwind overview of Diversio. Diversio is a global leader in people and culture solutions, serving organizations in 100 languages across the globe, spanning over 51 countries. Our academically validated platform offers comprehensive D&I measurement, data analytics, strategy, and consulting services. Our global mission, also a local mission, we're very much committed to transforming workplaces to be inclusive and harassment-free through data-driven solutions and proactive measures. It's the first, I love this slide, it's the first end-to-end platform, so only working with one vendor we know is incredibly important from a time and also from cost efficiencies point of view. So think of Diversio around data and analytics, education and training, and also our consulting arm. We're trusted by some of the world's most innovative companies, which you briefly saw there. We will be sending out the presentation afterwards. Anya, as you're the co-founder, would you care to walk through the next 2 or 3 slides? You're on mute.
Thank you. So happy to. At Diversio, the way that we approach organizations is by first collecting data from their employees. Now, we collect various types of data, but generally it can be broken out into 2 categories. The first is we ask who employees are. So a lot of the time that's demographic data, things like social mobility, gender, whether or not employees are taking care of a child or an elder, cultural background, those sorts of things. We're also collecting mental health more and more in recent years. And then we also ask how employees are experiencing the workplace, whether or not they feel like their managers are fair, whether or not they feel like they have career growth. And at the intersection of those 2 pieces of data, we tend to find trends and patterns across the way that employees are experiencing their employer, their workplace. And we tend to find challenges that particular groups of employees might be facing in the organization, which is where recommendations come in around how to strategically go in and alleviate some of those. The way that we help drive change, or the way that any organization can help drive change, whether they work with us or they're doing it internally themselves, is of course through a variety of levers that are typically available to HR. So, number one, of course, is data collection, whether that's engagement surveying, understanding who your employees are, or other forms of data collection, feedback, for example, on certain programs and policies. We also conduct training and education. A lot of the time, the challenges that you are finding within the organization from a culture perspective will have to do with training the team. So training your managers, for example, to become better mentors, or training your employees to understand each other's experiences better to show up in a more meaningful way for their colleagues. We also conduct program and policy audits to understand how organizations compare relative to what's considered best practice. Of course, the programs that, Goldman Sachs or British Business Bank are going to have as best practice within their organization are going to be different than the programs and policies that might be present at IKEA. So that's a very important nuance to consider when you're carrying out one of these. And on top of everything, we of course do consulting. So lots of interesting bespoke engagements there. Generally speaking, when people and culture data is collected across any organization, again, agnostic of whether or not we work with it, with the company, what it can help you do is understand the strengths and weaknesses of your business, not just from a representation perspective, but also from a employee empowerment perspective, how employees are feeling and therefore how they're performing. Ultimately, every company does better when our employees are actively engaged, because that means they actually want to show up to work and want to do what you hired them to do. Data also helps us track progress all the time, over time. So really show that ROI, that return on investment. If we're running a program, it's hard to know whether or not it's been successful unless we're collecting data to indicate proof points. And then, of course, guiding information, interventions, and informing choices. So data will allow us to understand where is the most efficient use of our budget, the most efficient use of our resources, and time allocation. We all know that HR time is limited, and so are budgets. And so understanding the gaps through the data will allow you to prioritize in a much more smart way.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anya. Just before we jump into top trends for 2025, we've had a question about data collection. People get nervous when they hear about data collection, collecting people's personal and also demographic data. How are some of the ways that we help companies navigate that from a legal and also from a compliance perspective?
It's a great question. Just throwing it out there, I don't want this to be just like the Diversio show. So I'm going to
Yeah.
help folks on the webinar understand how you can do it yourselves if that's the route that you want to go. And then of course I'll mention how we can help you with it. Generally speaking, it's smart to be cautious when it comes to starting data collection, because of course, especially in the EU, especially in the UK, you do fall under GDPR regulations around data privacy, data anonymity when it comes to collecting personally identifiable information from your employees. Personal identifiable information, or PII, is effectively any information through which an employee could, in theory, be identified. So that's not just things like an employee email along with other demographic or personal information about the employee. It could also be, in theory, deduced who an employee is through a combination of otherwise anonymous data points. So being very careful when we collect that information is very important. That being said, you can absolutely do it. It's a little bit easier for you to do it with a third-party provider because it creates space from you and the data that's being collected. And if you only have access to aggregated data as an employer, then it makes things a little bit easier for you from a compliance perspective for both the regulatory reporting requirements, but then also privacy under GDPR. As an employer, you need to know that you are a data owner. So everything that falls under those categories, they're a little bit more stringent. If a third party was to come and collect the data for you, they operate as a data processor, and they would typically have a list of requirements that they would need to meet, like us, in order to collect the data for you. And you need to be very vigilant when you are auditing potential data processors to ensure that they do, in fact, meet those requirements under GDPR. So those requirements are things like security protocols such as SOC or penetration testing. They also have to do with where the data is stored. There are, of course, European Union is sort of our default, but there are other countries where it's permissible to store data, like Canada. And there's also a lot of other requirements that need to be complied with in order to effectively collect data from your employees. So like I said, bring in your lawyers, have conversations with them, read the legislation that's available online. It's as accessible as possible, although I have to say it is quite dense. Understand whether you're a data owner or a data processor. That's a very important distinction. And if you do work with a third party, if you can sort of allocate the budget to do that, make sure to audit them quite well and make sure that they're collecting in a way that's proper for your type of organization and your jurisdiction.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope that helps the folks. We'll also include plenty of links in the show notes today, just to give you more information. Diversio has sort of broken a lot of that down for you to make it much more accessible to understand. So the top trends for 2025, this is quite subjective. We have surveyed a lot of our clients and also online in terms of the most searched for terms. So we're going to focus on this 6 today. We're not saying there isn't more, but these are the 6 that are really keeping people awake at the moment. So if we start with AI regulation readiness, for those of you in the UK, our Prime Minister Keir Starmer has been talking about AI all week. Somewhat unconvincingly, but AI is very much part of everything that we all do, and it has been for many years. The EU's Artificial Intelligence Act is set to enforce stringent requirements on the use of AI, particularly in high-risk sectors. I know we have some folks from finance, for example, today on the call. Businesses will be required to implement transparency measures, conduct audits, and ensure responsible AI usage to comply with these regulations. Alongside AI regulation in the UK, forthcoming legislation such as the Employment Rights Bill and the potential introduction of Equality, Race and Disability Bill will drive changes in workplace practices. The Employment Rights Bill, which I believe is in April, is set to introduce measures like a day, one right to request flexible working, while the Equity, Race and Disability Bill could place a legal duty on employers with over 150 staff to carry out ethnicity and disability pay reporting. And we also have the gender pay reporting deadline, which is April, I think it's April the 1st or April the 2nd. The second aspect we'll focus on is around cyber security and data protection. We can use the word data quite a lot today. With the implementation of the NS2 directive, that's the NIS2 directive, there'll be expanded scope of cyber security requirements across various sectors. Organizations must enhance their cybersecurity measures and ensure compliance with data protection regulations to mitigate risks and avoid penalties, which goes back a little bit to what Anya was talking about previously. Sustainability reporting, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, abbreviated to CSRD, will expand the scope of sustainability reporting to include more companies and more detailed disclosures. Businesses will need to prepare for comprehensive environmental, social and governance, ECG, reporting to meet these enhanced transparency requirements. And back to Anya's point around density of information, it's an incredibly dense report, which I've read a number of times, and we have summarized the key elements, which again, will include a link in the show notes today. Anya, I think you wanted to address the next 3 points.
Yes, thanks so much, Dan. So first thing that we wanted to talk about from a working environment perspective was addressing challenges of hybrid work models. Of course, everyone knows, no one needs to be reminded, I'm sure, that we did, for the most part, move to or not for the most part, for 100% move to remote working schedules and remote working arrangements during the pandemic several years ago. And over the last few years, we have been moving back to these hybrid work environments. Now, I'm sure many of you have seen in the papers recently that certain organizations are coming back to work full time. Other organizations are remaining on the hybrid work model. I think it was Amazon that we saw online announced that they are now going to be 5 days a week from the office. It's a very hard and fast rule. So you might be wondering, what should we be doing? What kind of is the most impactful for our employees, but also enhances productivity? What we're finding that is, everyone's favorite answer, but it's something in the middle. We're finding that fully remote teams actually do tend to struggle with feelings of isolation and connectivity for their employees. We've actually observed in our data that mental health challenges tend to be greater across employees who are fully remote. So instances of depression and anxiety, for example, are on the rise with fully remote teams. And for the most part, this is very simply explained by the fact that people get lonely, especially people who might not have families or people who may not have those partners. They may just not come into contact with humans as often as they would through in the workday previously. And there is, instances of loneliness and depression on the rise as a result. On the other hand, a 5-day work week is extremely inflexible. And the truth of the matter is that people have changed and reshifted their at-home responsibilities over the last few years to adjust for a remote work environment. So people have moved away, people have, established patterns with caretaking obligations where they are leading in with their families, where previously maybe a nanny or outside help may have been brought in. And so people are really committed to maintaining that new infrastructure, if you will, at home. So as a result, I was actually speaking to the head of people at an organization that is trying to go fully in the office over the next, couple of months in 2025. And they're experiencing a lot of pushback, and their people are very, very unhappy because they are not able to rebalance things like their care obligations and their home obligations easily. And let's keep in mind as well that those sorts of responsibilities disproportionately affect certain employees. So a 5-day in-office rule will negatively impact our women, for example, who typically take on more of those care obligations. It will negatively impact our people with a disability. It can negatively impact our people with interestingly, with mental health conditions, if you're required to be in the office 5 days a week, 8 a.m. to 5 a.m. or 9 a.m. to 5, or sorry, not 5 a.m., 5 p.m., no matter what. So there is this model where the hybrid environment, this sort of combination of 2 days in the office or 3 days in the office versus flexibility to be at home as well, is emerging as a model that is going to be most useful in your organizations. Now, of course, there are exceptions to certain companies where your teams need to be on the floor, for example, or they need to be in person in retail environments or in factories or whatever it might be. So there's also flexibility that you can add in those situations. So, for example, equitable shift allocation or inclusive shift allocation or whatever it may be. So there's always things that you can do to maintain that flexibility, but that's definitely a key component of 2025, where we're seeing companies battle it out, whether it's remote or in person. The next trend that we're seeing is inclusive leadership development. So not rocket science. I'm sure nobody is shocked, but leadership development continues to be a top priority for organizations and will likely continue to be that for quite some time. Leaders are the individuals in your companies that set the tone and culture within the entire organization. Tone from the top is incredibly important for culture within a company. And if leaders are not bought in to the reasons why inclusivity is important, if leaders are not are not prepared to become good mentors, good sponsors, good teachers for the employees in your organizations, then that will have trickle down effects where your company often can become quite transactional in its relationships. And as a result, there will be challenges with things like retention, engagement, productivity, those sorts of things, and interrelationships between colleagues as well. So starting with your leadership and really ensuring that your leadership lives those values is incredibly important. I think a good recent example is what we're seeing at Costco, and the letter that their leadership, their board put out recently around the importance of living those values at Costco, how it helps them actually succeed as a business. They made quite a splash. If you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to take a look. But I think that that is an indicator of why strong leadership and that guidance is incredibly valuable for a company. And then finally, a focus on intersectionality. This goes back to our data collection. And effectively, what we're saying here is understanding who your employees are is incredibly insightful when it comes to assessing the trends of how employees are feeling and how they're experiencing the workplace. So overlapping that demographic data with data around where an employee is in the organization, so office, role, location, those sorts of things, and engagement data will provide you with insights that will help you strategically intervene across your company. If you run a large retail organization, typically the trends that we find in our distribution centers are very different than the trends that we find in HR. And then if you overlay on that things like employee age, for example, employee mental health, like I mentioned, gender, all sorts of things, you will see patterns and trends begin to emerge. The reason why this is beneficial for you, if you're an HR practitioner, is because it lets you understand what specifically is happening under the hood and what you can do, how you can engage in order to alleviate some of those pressures and tensions, again, to get you to a high performance culture. So data is your best friend, and definitely still collect it, of course, under GDPR compliance.
Oh, amazing. Anya, thank you so much for finishing off those next 3 points. We're next going to focus on some practical guidance around the data collection. So data collection and reporting, as we previously mentioned, to comply with CSRD, our organization must use ESRS, specifically ESRS S1 on your own workforce for getting the preparation ready for ESG disclosure. This includes 17 requirements covering policies, processes, targets, and metrics related to the workforces. We have a heap of guidance on this on our website, which again we'll share with you afterwards, but these are just some of the key elements from best practices, some of the challenges and some of the consequences, and also and you'll talk us through about how Diversio can help you navigate all of these quite complicated and quite complex, I can't even say complex, elements as well. So some of the best practices are conducting materiality assessment and implementing systems of regular monitoring, collaborating across departments for accuracy and regular reviews, updating process to ensure the high quality data, because high quality data is incredibly important. Some of the challenges companies are facing is around adapting to reporting requirements for newly enacted regulations, maybe not having the right people in place, potentially might be archaic technology, but then also not having the data up to date. Which goes into integrating ESG data into existing reporting systems, also managing diverse data sets, potentially across divisions, across teams, and also across territories where there are obviously different laws will apply, whether it's the UK, whether it's France, whether it's the US, or whether that might be Canada. Consequences of non-compliance are quite extreme. Penalties range across all the different countries, across the EU and UK for non-compliance. You've got fines. Obviously, from a public perspective, it can be quite damning on a brand, on their image, but also legal repercussions. Reputational damage is something which can hurt anybody. You don't have to be in a FTSE 500 company to have that. So it's incredibly important that everyone is aware of what we need to do, what are the best practices, what are some commonalities around the challenges companies face, but also really making it brutally clear that there are consequences for non-compliance and not reporting on the key 17 requirements on time. some of the ways that Diversio can help with ESRS compliance. Anya, I think you wanted to talk through secure data collection, the data analysis, and also that focus on people and culture and diversity and inclusion.
Thanks so much, Daniel. Uh, yes, so with regards to how we support under ESRS compliance, we do so through our platform. So as I mentioned, we typically act as a data processor when we come in and we collect data from company employees. This does mean that we collect data with an employee ID in order to make sure that we pull in as much data as possible from employees that are, of course, willing to submit that data. Voluntary data submission with consent is incredibly important. But typically we can get as close to 100% reporting as possible with this method. Our systems are secure, so we securely and compliantly collect demographic data to facilitate ESRS reporting. Data analysis is something that we do as our bread and butter within Diversio, so we can conduct quite extensive benchmarking for your organization. Generally speaking, a note on benchmarking is if you are a company, especially a larger company, I know that oftentimes benchmarking is something that is incredibly valuable for organizations. I will say that while benchmarking is important, I wouldn't over-index on how you compare relative to a benchmark, simply because we find that sometimes that can almost be a race to the bottom. There are industries that are still performing not very well when it comes to representation, especially when we're comparing relative to population. And while benchmarking is important to see where you stand relative to your peers, generally speaking, we really advise comparing yourself to the communities that you would like to serve and how representative you are of those communities. And of course, all of this is to say that we do bring a diversity and inclusion focus to the data that is collected. So our platform does integrate a DEI data into broader ESG reporting frameworks in order to help you consolidate your sustainability work, your ESG work, if you're doing that work, all under one umbrella and develop a holistic strategy. It's always tough when you have, 3 or 4 different strategies happening across the organization, and bringing it together under one pillar is important to make sure that everyone's rowing in the same direction.
Awesome, thank you. And just on a technical point, Anya, how is the exchange of data between Diversio and company A? Do I have to be hugely technical? What member of the team would normally engage with that? Is that quite a complex thing, or is Diversio able to relatively plug in quite easily?
We plug in really easily. Our software is standalone, and we have a lot of APIs that are able to leverage what you already have in the ways that you typically collect data. If you collect data, no pressure if you don't internally already. So it's pretty plug and play, I will say. I also did notice that there's a question in the chat around government guidelines for collecting data for smaller organizations, so those with 50 to 100 employees. Great question. So you should take a look at something called CSRD, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. Now, while CSRD applies currently to large companies of more than 250 employees, they are set to pose reporting requirements on smaller companies in 2026, I believe. With an option to opt out later, but those guidelines will be triggered for reporting next year for smaller organizations. So it's nuanced who will be asked to report. So depending on your sector or the type of organization you are, you may be mandated or you might not be. But it's all CSRD also strongly encourages voluntary compliance, and it does look like we're moving in the direction of mandating reporting from much more companies that are considered SMEs. So I just encourage you to take a look, see if you fall under the type of companies that will be mandated to report, and give it a good read. Just for anyone curious, we also assist with CSRD reporting. It's very similar to ESRS. There's a couple of nuances and differences around the type of demographic data that is asked and how it's reported and how it's classified, but all in all, it's very comparable. Hopefully these reporting regulations are designed in a way that you can sort of get at them with one set of metrics to comply.
Yeah, I'd only add to that. I think it's really around accountability and governance. Although you might not be asked to do it today, it is coming tomorrow. So I think from a risk perspective, from a legal risk, management risk, and also operational risk, it's something that all companies should be looking to do to make sure when actually that data, those audits are required, whether it's 2026 or whether potentially it's earlier, that you do have a history of good data collection and all those metrics which you're going to be required to report on.
Yeah. One thing I will mention as well is oftentimes what companies struggle with is convincing employees to participate in data collection. One of the ways to motivate that participation is to be very transparent with employees around how the data is going to be used and why you need it. Also, the fact that the data is aggregated when you're doing your reporting, it's not on the particular individual, it's on the group of individuals. So we have internally rules and guidelines about how we solicit the data from employees and what gets us the best response rate. We typically see our response rates be around, north of 90%. Industry is much lower. So my point being is if you're struggling, reach out. We can give you some tips and pointers, but it is possible to get close to 100% reporting from your employees.
Amazing. Thank you. Well, the compliance element of the webinar is now behind us. There's a heap of links which has been put into the chat. This is the most exciting part for me, 2025, the road ahead. And we're so lucky to have Anya with us to walk us through the next frontier. We're going to be introducing Lumi. We're going to be looking around connecting companies to solutions, getting companies closer to their employees, and also generating insights with generative AI. Anya, over to you. Oh, you're on mute.
Classic. I don't know. I didn't realize I did that.
It does it automatically. There's a ghost.
I know it's like breathing at this point. So thank you so much. And this part, I know that I mentioned that I was not going to try not to plug Diversio too much at the start of the presentation, but in this part, this is where I really double down on talking about our company and what we do, just because I love it so much. And we have lots of very, very exciting features and products coming out in 2025, and I'm keen to share. This is the first group I'm actually going to be sharing these with, so very exciting. If people have thoughts or feedback, please put it in the chat. We're always looking to collect opinions about our product. So first and foremost, we are going to be launching Lumi. So Lumi is going to be our Diversio's generative AI companion. What Lumi is intended to do is help you with anything that has to do with your people and culture challenges within the organization. So there's going to be many applications of Lumi, but one of the first ones that we decided to start with is inclusive job ads for inclusive hiring. One of the really interesting trends that we see and proven out by scientific studies is the way that you craft your job postings when you're recruiting will really dictate who applies to the posting. So different type of language attracts different type of people. Or put other words, different type of language actually repels different type of people. And of course, as we're looking for the best talent, we want to attract as many candidates as possible in order to find the right one. Because, how do you know if you're finding the right one for the role if you're only getting a limited number of applications? So our first application of our generative AI Lumi is actually going to be to craft inclusive job ads. And job ads, period. So if your organization, you have recruiters and recruiting and hiring professionals on your team looking to, broaden the type of talent that is attracted to your positions within the organization, this is definitely something that we would be able to help you with. Of course, I have to say, this is something that you can learn as well if you wanted to, but it does take some time. It does take practice. And of course, while Lumi can do, hundreds of these within the course of the day, an individual, it takes much longer. And so something you can do, but something that we're excited to help you do at scale. Our next really exciting addition to the product this year is smart trainings. Like I mentioned, we do a lot of data collection and analysis. We also do a lot of education and training. Dan, you said it, we're an all-in-one solution. And when it comes to combining the two, that's where smart trainings was born. So within our product, you can see the challenges that employees in your organization are facing, depending on what business unit they're in or what demographics they are, et cetera, et cetera. We now within the platform are recommending training and education that are associated with that particular pain point. So as an example, if we're seeing that maybe our LGBTQ community is experiencing not great environment from their direct managers. They're feeling a little bit disconnected, like they don't have mentors across those managers. We would be able to go in and potentially share targeted training with managers in a particular department about how to be great mentors and how to ensure that they're being welcoming to all sorts of different folks, including our LGBTQ colleagues. So it's a lot more targeted. In this particular case, you don't need to sort of deploy unconscious bias training for everyone and hope that it does something. This is connecting your issue with your solution directly. I almost consider it like going to the doctor, getting diagnosed after a test or blood work or whatever else, and getting the medicine that's going to specifically help you with the challenge that you're facing, and not just like a general antibiotic. Clearly, I don't know anything about medicine, but I hope you followed the metaphor. So next is our pulse surveys. This goes back to the data collection. Originally, over the last few years that we've been running our software, we've prioritized data collection on an annual basis. So one big survey going out annually. Now what we're recommending and what we're seeing the benefits of is actually collecting data as you go. Frankly, mostly because we see that there's a lot of ups and downs in the mood of your workforce that happen as a result of both internal and external factors and indicators. Internally, for example, pulsing your team after a layoff tends to be a good idea, or after maybe a new leader comes into a particular group or department. Also, after you run an event, or after you run a training, or after you deploy a mentorship program to see how it's landing with your employees, collecting feedback from smaller parts of the organization on the go really allows you to make sure that you are getting the best bang for your buck. It's kind of an American saying, sorry, as you're moving through with intervention. So you don't have to wait 12 months or sometimes even longer to get that validation. And that allows you to sort of course correct if anything is going on, or double down, frankly, on things that are working. So pulse surveying is something I'm really excited about. Next slide. Great. And then, like I mentioned, with Lumi, it's not only the job ads that we're going to be that we've launched. Actually, they're already live. If you're interested in them, they're up and running. But our next stage with our generative AI companion Lumi is going to be helping organizations who are on our platform interpret their insights. There's a lot of data that can be collected and interpreted. We work with very large companies, including SMEs who are, small and very large companies that are hundreds of thousands of employees. And it is tough to process all of that data as a person and to figure out, okay, where do I start? Of course, our team of expert consultants are there to help guide you, but they're not available every hour, every minute of the day. But Lumi is, and Lumi is trained on the way that we have advised and we have helped clients over the years. The megabytes of data that we have had and have collected over the years that we've been running the company. And Lumi, I will say so myself, has a fantastic ability to offer very targeted, very mature advice when it comes to people and culture challenges within the business. And so this is something that we'll be launching later this year that will help you hopefully have a companion when it comes to working on people and culture challenges within the organization.
Incredible. Your own HR AI assistant.
Exactly. And then finally, last but not least, we kind of looking ahead. We are focusing a lot on reporting, and by reporting, this is already available within the dashboard as a feature. We're just going to make sure that it's now presented in a beautiful format. So, for example, for our companies that are publishing their ESG reports every year, sustainability reports every year, this is something that we can help with now by leveraging our wonderful designers to create something beautiful for you so that you don't have to do it for yourself. Team collaboration, so bringing on many users onto our platform where they can collaborate with each other. So your HR business partners or employees or whoever you may want to be collaborating with. And then, of course, last but not least, doubling down on really staying on top of any reporting requirements, reporting regulations, just to ensure that you don't have to worry about it because we'll do it for you.
Amazing. Anya, thank you so much. A ton of work for you and the team. That's what I'm going to say.
Excited to do it.
Yeah, we're excited to see it. Absolutely. We've answered a couple of questions already that have come through. How do we, that's commas, create and implement inclusive selection processes? I think looking at Lumi a couple of slides back, ensuring that any bias is taken out of your job adverts to make sure it doesn't repel candidates around gender, around age, around sexual orientation, and also around religion. That's critical to make sure that what you're publishing online is inclusive and it reaches the most widest and the most relevant candidates for the roles that you're hiring for. Any other elements? The question again: how do you create and implement inclusive selection processes? I'm obviously thinking, Anya, around training, around line managers, around HR business partners as well, because that's the first time people come into contact with your business. Number one is through the job advert, and number two is maybe the first phone call, the first Zoom meeting. So that is incredibly important that we empower, we train, we upskill those folks in the business that are going to represent the business, but also understand whether you talk to Daniel or talking to Anya, they are completely different people, and there's a different process about how people like to be spoken to, in what environment, do you want questions ahead of the interview, etc., etc.
Definitely. I'll also add, just sort of kind of going down the list, there's various stages of hiring a candidate. So, from job descriptions to sourcing to the interview process to evaluation to the actual kind of selection of the individual. And there's ways to create an inclusive process throughout each one of those stages. So for example, with job descriptions, we already said inclusive language is incredibly important, but also highlighting your commitment to diversity and inclusion is important to encourage folks to apply, especially something on like your website, but authentic commitment, not just like a boilerplate saying like, we believe in DEI, something along the lines of like, this is the work that we're doing. These are the programs that we have available. We value our people. For sourcing candidates, I would say it's really important to partner with organizations that work with underrepresented groups or our communities for underrepresented groups. Posting diverse job ads on community networks, for example, and then also considering things like blind resume screening. consistently we see that resume screening is a big problem. Names that are foreign sounding names are 60% less likely to get a call back from our recruiters, even if they have gone through training. So this is something that is encouraged, I would say, for organizations, although it does take a little bit more of that effort. So of course, if you're a smaller company, you may not be able to do it. But if you are a smaller company, I would say that training your recruiters and your recruiting team and your hiring managers on things like unconscious bias becomes very, very important. So they're able to catch themselves, they're able to know what the common downfalls are, and they're able to sort of proactively mitigate those. It's important to structure interviews in an inclusive way as well, with standardized questions for candidates, ensuring, for example, how you are giving candidates cases. So is it take home or is it on the spot? Certain people perform better or worse depending on what the kind of structure of the interview is. And it's good to have that flexibility and sort of try to set up as many people for success as possible. Effectively, what we're doing is just trying to create an even fit playing field. And this isn't even necessarily a gender thing. This could be an extrovert introvert thing. So again, you're just thinking about how to make the interview as smooth as possible in order to really get to the core of someone's abilities. An interview is a stressful process for anybody. And so the best interview is the one that creates the least stress for the candidate. So you can truly see how capable they really are. And then, of course, assess them on those merits. Accessibility is a real big part of it as well. So ensuring that the interview process is accessible for people with disabilities, for example. Like if you ask people to come into the office, that it isn't an accessible space, so people aren't stressed about that. That's just kind of an aside. Evaluation, making sure that you conduct, pre-calibration meetings with your hiring managers to ensure that they have the same criteria. They know exactly what is necessary for the role or the job. And then, of course, you get into that selection process. One last thing that I'll mention, even before the job posting gets posted, this is one of the most important ones. So please, kind of, if you remember anything, remember this one. Always assess the true qualifications that are needed to do a job well. Typically, what ends up happening, especially in large organizations, is we will either pull a traditional list of requirements for that role that was written 10 years ago, or we will look at the qualifications of the person that is exiting the role, and we will just copy and paste because it's the easiest thing to do on a job ad. That can actually be incredibly detrimental to hiring inclusively because the criteria for success in a position really changes. So for example, if 10 years ago, we really needed a university degree for a particular entry-level coding position for, whatever reason, we need to reassess now. There's other forms of education. For example, boot camps can produce incredibly qualified candidates, but they don't necessarily have that college or university degree. So reevaluating criteria with a creative mind is incredibly important for that hiring. Sorry, I know that was a lot, but there's
No, not at all. I can
things
only
here.
agree with you 100%, Anya. But yeah, that job description, the amount of roles, the requirements, the responsibilities, there is always probably 56% of that content is either outdated or there's too much of that content as well. So yeah, it's incredibly important to cleanse that document before it actually, gets federated out across your LinkedIn, your Indeeds, and any other online job boards. Wow, we've covered the questions. We're 50 minutes in. Thank you all so much today for joining us. Anya, thank you so much for taking time out to drop into the UK. You can reach me in London via LinkedIn or at danielfellows@diversio.com if you'd like to learn more, or obviously if you've got any questions. Our next Diversio UK webinar will be on the 11th of February. Diversio Conversations, insights from Oakley Capital on tackling people and culture challenges and opportunities. We're delighted to have Zoe Lockwood, Chief People Officer at Oakley Capital, in conversation with me.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Daniel. Bye, everybody. Bye.